Ladies and gentlemen, the Oberon rework is finally here, and as we all expected after Pablo revealed it during the last dev stream, it is absurdly broken. I swear, they have actually turned Oberon from what I would have said is one of the weakest frames in the entire game into probably the easiest character that anyone can pick up. I know that characters like Revenant or Wukong kind of get slandered because they seem like such newbie picks, and a lot of people run them because they are stupid easy to use, and Oberon is now going to be looped in with those too because Jesus Christ, I don't know how you can make a Warframe more powerful in the game, unless they just gave him like a massive Q button that killed the entire map, which they might as well have. Just to hop right into things, Oberon's passive has received a major rework. Where previously it was focused around giving your companions more survivability, it now is entirely based on Oberon himself, because companion survivability was buffed so much in the first run of the companion rework that he needed something new, and Righteous Negation is about as broken of a passive as a Warframe can have. If I just read off the description, Oberon grants Righteous Negation to himself and his allies in affinity range when he collects health orbs, protecting players against the next instance of damage, stacks up to 3 times. So what does this mean? If you pick up any variant of health orb, you will gain 1 stack of Righteous Negation. There are infinite health orbs here, so I just picked up 3 automatically. But you can see that you have these stacks either by looking in the top right, where you will see your currently active number next to this symbol, or just looking at Oberon himself, because he has these shields with branch looking things coming out of them. Regardless of where you see them, this passive is Revenant level survivability just for picking up health orbs, which as we get deeper into his kit, he does more of that than any other Warframe. Honestly, there are some design choices here with this passive that are really confusing, and while this video isn't going to be a large critique of the Oberon rework and more of just a here's how he is now, here's the best way to use him, it is kind of interesting that Oberon gets a lot of armor and HP buff stuff, while also getting a passive that means that you never need to care about armor or HP or shields or anything, because trust me, when you get into mission, considering just how many health orbs that Oberon generates, you can never die. Part of that is definitely due to the fact that when you take damage, you will gain 0.25 seconds of invulnerability after you take damage if it is not the last stack. If it is the last stack, then you will gain 0.5 seconds of invulnerability. So if I get my shields again and we consider what this would give us, that is a 1 second invulnerability gate that you get for having 3 health orb pickups, which in mission is incredibly abundant. So Oberon is now completely immortal. Fun. Smite has actually seen a lot of changes, and while some people are pretty sad that the extra like Smite orbs that came out from enemies are gone now, the ability has a much clearer purpose and is a lot better at executing it. The main utility that I would say this ability has is what I like to call eximus busting, which is seeing an eximus and then saying, no, you are not anymore. Yeah, 483,000 damage to this enemy, immediately removing all of their overguard and all of their armor permanently. This is again why I say that Oberon has become one of the easiest Warframes in the entire game. His passive makes him entirely immortal. If your weapons aren't up to snuff and have a hard time dealing with Eximus, you look at them and then they are no longer an Eximus unit. And what I find kind of funny is that this isn't just a one enemy target ability in terms of removing overguard. If there are more overguarded enemies nearby, they kind of just all lose it. So if there's an ancient overguard Eximus or whatever they're called, just giving it to every enemy around you, no they don't anymore. To get into the more technical aspect, what this ability is doing besides the overguard and armor removal is dealing up to 75% of an enemy's health and shields immediately to themselves. Now, this does begin at 30%. I do have some strength shards, so it is a little bit higher than you were seeing here, but with 0 mods or shards, you will immediately deal 30% of their health and shields back to them, stacking all the way up to 75%, leaving them with only 25% of their original defense stats minus the overguard and armor. It also will stagger the enemy that it is triggered on and trigger the radiation status effect on them, which is even more crowd control and even more energy generation due to an arcane we're going to get into later. And then lastly, enemies near the target also take a portion of the damage. If you see down there, it says radial damage 12%. This does begin at 10% and just means that enemies that are within range here, you can see the 6-meter radius that does scale. They just take 10% of what the initial targeted enemy takes. Another really important thing about Smite is that it is actually one-handed, which means you can cast it while doing other actions. So if I bring in just a normal enemy, shoot some, start reloading, I can cast Smite mid-reload. So take advantage of that because you can weave it in while bullet jumping, doing all this stuff. It is a very fluid ability that has a lot of really great effects. I assume this one is going to get a lot of play by new players because it takes away the hardest enemies in the game. and is also pretty good for actual vets. Hallowed ground is a lot easier to show against actual enemies instead of reading off the ability description. You cast, and then in a big circle around you, you make a lot of plants on the ground, i.e. hallowed ground. When enemies are on this hallowed ground, the ability does 1 radiation every 0.5 seconds to them, force proccing the status, which means that it is 2 radiation per second. And besides that, it doesn't really do that much. So you might be questioning, why do you want to use this? But there are some synergies between the radiation status and the aforementioned Arcane that is so incredibly important on Oberon now. But this is also another level of crowd control. And consider what Oberon now has going for him. He has his ridiculous passive and the fact that you can create 3 massive areas, because I have no range modded on right now, and look at how much ground we're covering. All of these enemies are hit in this massive AoE, but they just won't be shooting you. Radiation means that they start targeting each other. So not only are you not going to get hit, but even if you do, you don't take any damage. On top of that though, it also gives you protection against status effects for you and allies. So now you can't even get hit with like a viral proc or something to make you take a lot of damage, or something like heat. Enemies can't do anything to you. You can have a maximum of 3 of these areas active at once wherever you want on the map. I do recommend when you are playing to just find a big tile set, put these down in 3 spots all around it, and then every enemy that walks near you just will stop shooting at you. Renewal is definitely a lot better now, seeing as it doesn't scale the energy with the amount of things that it is healing, but I also find it to kind of just be irrelevant in Oberon's kit due to all of the other methods of survivability that he has. But even if all of those fail somehow, yeah, Renewal is here to help keep you alive, and that does extend to your allies. This is a drain-based ability that gives you a lot of different benefits, like an initial heal of 125, more health per second, some armor, and then allies get bonus armor, and you also slow down your bleed out timer. That is a lot of things, but none of them are really all that good. The benefits from Renewal are given to you and allies within affinity range, but you know, armor, healing, bleed out timer increase, status effect clearing, it just isn't really all that meaningful because statuses are removed by Hallowed Ground, and your allies also can get righteous negation. Like if you have an Oberon in your squad now, you just won't really be able to die. So the benefits of Renewal are kind of lost on me, and this is definitely going to be his new helmet slot, which isn't a bad thing because helmet is the meta in 2025. So having a defined slot for that isn't terrible. The only positive thing I can see here is that Renewal does heal defense objects, companions, and stuff like that. So if you're trying to like go to level cap in a defense mission, maybe having a high strength Oberon isn't the worst idea, but this one is just kinda and also is a drain on your energy, even if it is a lot easier to manage now than it was pre-update. Reckoning though, this is where a lot of things start to happen. This is a 100 energy cost ability, so it is pretty damn expensive, but what it does for Oberon is really useful. What happens when you cast is you will lift up all enemies within a base 15 meters to strip 50% of their armor, trigger the radiation status on them, and then deal some damage that scales in a little bit of a weird way. As you can see, there is a base 9,000 damage being dealt here, but there is also a bonus 900 damage dealt per radiation status on an enemy. So if the enemy has 10 radiation, which they likely will due to Hallowed Ground triggering so much of it, you will just get an extra 9,000 damage. So having 10 radiation doubles the damage of Reckoning, even if 18,000 total on the Steel Path isn't really all that much. I can see this being a very effective nuke for new players, and seeing as they are giving away a free Oberon, I assume that this change was kind of intended for them. Besides that though, what we do actually care about is the armor strip here. A 50% armor strip means that all you need is 200% strength to remove all of the armor off of enemies permanently. So Smite can just delete an eximus's overguard and armor, and you can use Reckoning to then delete the armor off of every enemy nearby. It's kind of ridiculous. On top of that though, Oberon also gains 10 armor per enemy hit, plus 5 armor per radiation on them. The radiation synergies here are crazy. If only radiation was a little bit better of a status. Regardless, this does have a cap of 1,000, but I do believe this does extend to your allies as well. So you are just, on top of the passive and everything else, Oberon is so easy now. How are you supposed to die? And then finally, enemies have a 50% chance, non-scaling, to drop a health orb when they die, regardless of if the ability kills them or not. And this ties, as you could guess, directly back into his passive, which requires health orbs to actually give you the righteous negation. So, cast Reckoning on a big group of enemies. And actually, I'll just do this right now to these guys to demonstrate how insane this is. We hit them with Reckoning, now I'm just going to kill them. Wow, these new recoil changes actually suck. Like, I just wasn't shooting the enemy. Yeah, terrible. That's a conversation for another time. Look at how many health orbs are on the ground. Like, come on now, DE. What is this? So with that wrapping up all of Oberon's abilities, I'm definitely going to say that he is a lot better than he was before, but there are some weird design choices here that I'm sure other YouTubers are going to make some commentaries about, and I will leave it to them to look more into it, though it's pretty clear. His passive kind of makes all of the other stuff that things like Renewal or Reckoning with its armor or Hallowed Ground kind of not make sense. Regardless though, that is how it is currently implemented, so I am going to take advantage of it. Before we get to the build though, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Arcane Universal Fallout. This Arcane states that each radiation status effect inflicted on enemies by abilities gives a 6% chance to drop a universal health orb. Oberon, like Corvex, is Radiation the Warframe. He triggers so much of the status that this Arcane is practically a must use on him. And luckily in this update, DE has made it possible to trade Vosper for this Arcane or the rest of the Hex Arcanes at Lloyd in the Necrolisc or whatever it's called. So instead of only being able to get 1 or 2 of these a week, you can now trade for them as much as you would like, which is really good because this Arcane is going to be used on every Oberon build in existence, as Universal Orbs also trigger his passive and give you energy. Let me show you how ridiculous this looks. I'm just going to burn some of my energy real quick. So they're going to have a ton of radiation on them. And then now I will try to shoot them, fail because the recoil changes are terrible, and look for a universal orb. All right, there are some universal orbs. I'm gonna do this one. So let me cast my ability. You're going to see that we are going to get a stack of righteous negation and energy for picking this orb up. So yeah, you're going to be using this Arcane all the time because it does everything that Oberon wants him to do. And remember, it's really, really easy to get this now, so there's not really much of an excuse. But my overall thoughts on how Oberon should be played is definitely with a melee build, because you do need to pick up health orbs for his passive to actually work. And when you are using guns like, Sato or something, you might not always be next to the enemies that you are killing. So using a melee kind of ensures that you are going to be running over these orbs to pick them up. And I think that is very, very important. I do have a second non-helmet build, but just to get this one out of the way first, it is really simple. We build for really high range so that we can armor strip and trigger a lot of radiation on massive areas at a time, but we also want good strength for Wrathful Advance, which is our helmet ability, and it does benefit Smite, Hallowed Ground, and Reckoning really, really well here. An odd choice of mod that you might see is Energy Conversion, which grants you 50% more ability strength to your next cast. The reason I use this is because the only other strength mod we have here is Transient Fortitude, which technically gives us 5% more, but also comes with a negative to our ability duration, and Wrathful Advance already barely lasts long anyways, so using this over Transient is better QOL in my opinion, especially because we get so many universal orbs that this is active almost all the time. Arcane Strike for attack speed on our melee universal fallout, obviously, more ability strength from growing power, and it is overall a very simple build. Unfortunately, most of Oberon's augments are pretty bad. Radiation is not a good status enough to want to infuse a ton of it onto our weapons. Hallowed Eruption doesn't really do anything meaningful here, and Hallowed Reckoning, while giving us a little bit more range for the 4th ability, also doesn't do anything meaningful here to make it better than using any of these mods. I recommend pairing this with any kind of melee influence melee, but the Okina is just one of the best. Here is the build I'm using on it, quite simple. I've talked about this weapon a ton lately. And then Archon Shards wise, I am using 1 casting speed because his casting speed is already kind of okay, so it's not that important to have a ton of it, but 1 Tau is very nice, and then 2 Tau Forged Violet Archon Shards is incredibly important here. Like I said, Oberon and generating health orbs is one of his favorite things to do, so turning those health orbs into energy is even better. And then just 20% more ability strength from the Crimson Shards. I honestly didn't really know what to put here, so you can use anything else here if you would like. And that is kind of the Oberon build that I am running with. I will bring this against some Corrupted Heavy Gunner Eximus units. We are going to cast Wrathful Advance, smite them all, hit them with this, start going to town with the melee, and it's typical melee influence things, but now remember that you cannot die, are generating infinite energy. Overguard is not a problem. It's ridiculous. I don't really like... What were y'all thinking, DE? What was the play with this one? Not that I'm complaining. This is really, really good, so I'm okay with it. Here is a non-weapon specific, non-helmet build. You can use this with pretty much anything. This arcane slot is a flex. I'm just using it for tempo because I am using the Sado on him otherwise. But this is just a pretty good starter build because all he really needs is strength, range, and duration. Nothing else. Is this actually... Wait, yeah. Yo, I'm funny, guys. This is the exact same build. I did not realize that. Yeah, Oberon is stupid easy. And because his passive actually gives you so much survivability that your HP barely ever gets touched, if you use secondary fortifier, you will be able to get some overguard to give you the primed sure-footed effects that you would normally have to get from the mod, but you won't actually lose the overguard very quickly due to his passive. So you can use Cunning Drift, Power Drift, Rush, whatever you want here. Oberon is so easy and flexible right now. And if you are a newer player, even though you might not have all these mods, the things that I'm saying here hold true. Build duration, build range, build strength. Don't really worry that much about efficiency as long as you have equilibrium. I have my equilibrium from my shards, but if you don't have that, definitely use the equilibrium mod because this is going to be your key to never running out of energy on Oberon. And then if you have Arcane Universal Fallout, well, combining these two together is kind of cheating. One thing I haven't even talked about yet is actually the companion, which should be a Panzervopophyla with the Synth Deconstruct mod, because guess what this does? It makes enemies 25% more likely to drop a health orb when they are killed. So, even more health orbs. I mean, how much more broken could it get? Also, an interesting synergy is that if you are using Renewal on your Oberon, you can definitely use Seismic Bond for 30% more efficiency for free from your companion, just something I thought I should mention. Focus School can literally be whatever the hell you want. And yeah, I'd say the Oberon rework is a success in terms of making him really good, but is it a success in terms of making him cohesive? Well, maybe some other people will have some more to say about that. But I will catch you very soon for the Noko build guide coming in a couple of hours. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.